Have you ever felt the weight of a beauty that fades between your fingers, like silk that tears, or the echo of a song that no one else remembers? There is a type of sadness that is not born of lack, but of the loss of what was once perfect. It is the mourning for a design that was traced with threads of light, and that, little by little, was covered by a mantle of thick ashes. Close your eyes for a moment and allow your breathing to find the rhythm of this story. We are not here to talk about cold dates or a mechanical genealogy. We are here to inhabit the silence that preceded the storm, to feel the dampness of the earth before the sky broke into 1,000 pieces of water, and to contemplate the smoke of a tower that intended to storm the throne of the invisible. Imagine a world where sunlight began to filter through a veil of violence. The air, which was once the pure breath of the Creator, became dense, laden with the metallic scent of conflict and the whisper of shadows that walked like giants upon the dust. The Nephilim were not just a legend of strength, they were the physical manifestation of a profound distortion, the footprint of a rebellion that sought to mix the eternal with the fallen, darkening the horizon of humanity. In this corner of history, the heart of the sovereign does not beat with the coldness of a distant judge, but with the agony of a father who sees his firstborn consume himself in his own fire. It is not a capricious anger, it is a cosmic lament. It is the pain of seeing that every thought, every fiber of human desire had become a stroke of darkness on the canvas of existence. We find ourselves on the threshold of the great crumbling. The world is about to be dissolved, not out of hatred, but out of a justice that is, in its purest essence, an act of desperate mercy to cleanse the wound. The coming rain is not just water, it is the tears of heaven falling upon a creation that forgot how to breathe holiness. Join me through this divine tapestry. We are going to walk through the mud of corruption, feel the creaking of the ark's wood beneath our feet, smell the wet earth when the first rainbow tore through the post-flood gray, and finally, observe the collapse of our own words on the plains of Shinar. This is not just the story of a lost civilization. It is the mirror of our own fragility and the score of a grace that insists on writing a new song, even when the world seems to have fallen silent. Prepare yourself, because the weight of these shadows is about to reveal to us the magnitude of the light that never goes out. Beauty at times begins with a wound. To understand the light, we must first inhabit the weight of the shadows that tried to suffocate it. We are not simply witnessing the end of a world, we are contemplating the broken heart of the sovereign before the torn canvas of his creation. The story of the flood and the tower are not merely chronicles of judgment, but the record of a love that insists on rescuing what we, in our pride, strive to break. There was a time when the earth grew heavy. It was not the weight of fruit, but the weight of evil. The original design, goo-woven fabric of threads of light and purpose, began to unravel under the pressure of a rebellion that knew no bounds. The Nephilim walked upon the dust, living monuments to distortion, reminders that heaven and earth had mingled in a way that was never the Creator's intention. Violence was not an isolated act, it was the very breath of humanity. Every thought was a stroke of darkness, every desire a cry for independence that drove away the breath of life. The world was becoming a place of empty echoes and lost gazes in the abyss of the self. Have you ever felt that pain is so deep that language is no longer enough? In the eternal realms, the sovereign experienced that lament. It was not the capricious anger of an idol of clay, but the agony of a father. The Bible says it grieved him to his heart. Imagine the depth of that divine sigh. The flood did not begin in the clouds, but in the tears of heaven. The rain was not just water falling. It was the dissolution of the cosmos, a return to original chaos, as creation could no longer sustain the holiness of life. It was a necessary cleansing, a clean slate written with the ink of infinite pain. In the midst of the collapse, there was an ark, a small sanctuary of wood and pitch floating upon nothingness. It was not a pleasure boat, but a womb of hope. There, amidst the scent of animal, straw, and damp wood, the future was kept. Noah was not a superhero. He was a man who found grace. That word, grace, is the golden thread that runs through this entire tapestry. While the world was falling apart outside, the sovereign held that wooden box in the palm of his hand. It was the reminder that even in the severest judgment, the Creator's design always keeps a space for redemption. When the waters receded, the world smelled of wet earth and a new beginning. Noah's first sacrifice rose like a perfume, and in response, the sovereign painted his promise in the firmament. The rainbow is not just an optical phenomenon, it is the seal of a covenant. It is God saying, "I will remember." It is the beauty that emerges after the storm, a light that did not go out despite our fragility. That bow is the bridge between the justice that must cleanse and the mercy that chooses to sustain. But the human heart has a short memory and a long pride. On the plains of Shinar, the ego turned into architecture. "Let us make a name for ourselves," they said. They no longer sought the face of the sovereign. They sought their own divinity carved in stone and bitumen. Babel was the zenith of arrogance, the attempt to storm the throne of the invisible with hands stained with mud. It was not just a construction. It was a declaration of independence, an attempt to live without the need for grace. And then, the poetic tragedy occurred. Language, which was once the bridge of communion, was shattered. Words became walls. The silence of incomprehension fell upon Shinar. It was not an act of cruelty, but an act of restraint. The sovereign halting the advance of a darkness that would have no limits if everyone spoke the same language of rebellion. Dispersion was the consequence of wanting to be the center of a universe that is only one king. Here, we end this chapter, with humanity fragmented, wandering under a sky that seems further away, but remains the same sky of the rainbow. The weight of the shadows is real, the fall is deep, but the Creator's lament always ends on a note of hope. Because even in the collapse of our towers, His plan continues to weave a story that will eventually lead us back home. Close your diary for today. Breathe in the peace of knowing that even if our words fail and our hands grow weary of building, the Sovereign never stops writing His song over us. The echo of Eden was no longer a song. It had become a dull groan. Imagine for a moment that the very air becomes heavy, laden with a sadness that has no name. The earth, which was once the stage for God's footsteps at twilight, now trembled under the weight of a design that man had insisted on breaking. It was not just that we did evil, it was that our imagination had become a shadow factory. Every thought, every desire, every beat of the human heart was a dissonant note in the symphony of creation. We see this period as an era of twilight, the era of the Nephilim, Let us not look at them as simple figures of legend, but as the ultimate monument to human excess. They were the fallen ones, the physical manifestation of a glory that sought to be divine without God. The beauty of the daughters of men intertwined with a rebellion that came from the depths. And the result was a world where power was the only law. Darkness wasn't something external. It was an infection of the soul reflected in the gaze of every inhabitant of this wounded soil. And in the midst of that moral silence, the sovereign looked, not with the coldness of a distant judge, but with the pain of a father whose tapestry has been torn by the hands he himself formed. Scripture says that it grieved him to his heart. It is a lament. Then the heavens broke. But it was not just rain. It was as if the Creator, in his infinite justice and wounded mercy, allowed the tears of heaven to undo what sin had knotted. The fountains of the great deep burst forth. The order that separated the waters above from the waters below in Genesis collapsed. It was a decreation. The cosmos returned to that chaotic and dark ocean of the beginning before the voice of God set limits to the storm. Inside that wooden chest, the ark, the silence was absolute. Noah, the man who found grace not because of his perfection, but because of his faithfulness in the midst of madness, listened to the rhythmic pounding of the water against the cedar. It was the sound of a world dying so that it could be born again. The ark was not just a boat, it was a sacred womb where the seed of hope was kept, floating upon the judgment of God. Judgment and grace have never been as close as they were in these soaked timbers. God himself closed the door, a gesture of absolute protection that separated the old nature from the future that was about to sprout. When the waters receded, the world smelled of dampness and new opportunities. Noah stepped out into the open air, and the first thing he offered was a sacrifice. The smoke rose, a scent of rest that calmed the storm of the divine heart. And there, in that sky that still held the traces of the tempest, God hung his bow. Look closely at that rainbow. It is not just an optical phenomenon, it is a war bow that the sovereign warrior has decided to hang on the wall of the clouds. But there is a poetic detail that we sometimes forget. The bow points upward, toward heaven, not toward the earth. It is the promise that even if man fails again, and we know he will, the final judgment will not come through water. God himself assumes the responsibility of sustaining the cosmos, the stability of the seasons, the cycle of sowing and harvesting do not depend on us, but on the unwavering faithfulness of the one who promised never to destroy life in that way again. The rainbow is the seal of a covenant that allows us to breathe, work, and love under the security that the stage of redemption will remain firm until history reaches its end. From Noah, life sprouted like roots desperately seeking fertile soil. The Table of Nations is not a boring list of names, it is a divine choreography. Shem, Ham, and Japheth became the branches of an immense tree. God, in his sovereignty, was orchestrating diversity. Every ethnicity, every incipient tongue, every culture that began to gestate in the valleys of Mesopotamia and beyond was under his providential gaze. We were not just a mass of people, we were families becoming nations. It is a reminder that God is interested in the geography of our souls and the history of our peoples. He was preparing the canvas of the world so that centuries later, his blessing would reach every tribe and every tongue. But in the heart of that expansion, the old poison of pride began to fester once more. There's a profound and almost melancholy irony in the story. The tower was so small for the infinite that the text says God had to descend to see it. What for man was the pinnacle of progress, for the sovereign was a game of children in the mud. But it was a dangerous game. The unity of Babel was a unity in evil, a totalitarian system where the individual voice was lost in the chorus of collective pride. Then, the poetic tragedy occurred, the explosion of languages. God did not punish them with fire, but with the silence of understanding. Suddenly, one's neighbor became a stranger. The word that once united now separated. Babel ended in confusion, not by divine caprice, but as an act of mercy disguised as judgment. By dispersing them and confusing their tongues, God prevented human evil from consolidating into an eternal tyranny. The shattering of languages was the reminder that we are creatures and that our only true unity can only be found when it is His name and not ours that is exalted. Through this journey through the shadows of corruption, the roar of the flood, and the collapse of the towers of Babel, we see a repeating pattern. We try to go up, but we always end up falling. We try to build eternal names, but we only achieve ruins of clay. However, in the sovereign's design, every ruin is a space for a new sowing. The judgment of Babel prepared the stage so that one day the blessing would not be a tower of bricks, but a wooden cross. The confusion of languages awaited the day when a mighty wind at Pentecost would bring a new understanding, based not on pride, but on the Spirit. Even when we scatter, when we feel alone in the middle of a world that does not understand us, His plan continues to weave a story that will eventually lead us back home. He is the one who descends, not to judge our tower, but to rescue the weary builders. Breathe in the peace of knowing that, although our words fail and our hands grow weary of building for ourselves, the Sovereign never stops writing His song over us. The thread of grace traverses even the greatest disaster of our history. You said the design was perfect. You said it at the beginning, when light had not yet known the stain and the mud only served to receive the breath of life. But what happens when the breath becomes a sigh of sorrow? What happens when the silk of Eden unravels under the weight of a darkness that we ourselves decided to weave? We are entering one of the densest and deepest chambers of our sacred history, a place where beauty meets judgment, and where the silence of God becomes more eloquent than any storm. Here, between chapters 6 and 10 of Genesis, we do not only read about water and wood, or about towers and tongues. We read about the human heart trying to exist far from its source, and about a Creator who, despite the pain, refuses to let go of the thread of His grace. Time began to darken. The lineage of Seth, those who called upon the name of the Sovereign, began to mingle with the rebellion. Beauty became a currency, and power an idol. Here appear the Nephilim, the fallen ones, or overthrowers. Let us not see them merely as giants of legend, but as the incarnation of the human ego taken to its paroxysm, men of renown who filled the earth with violence. Evil was not a calculation error, it was a deliberate design of the heart. The text says that it grieved him in his heart. Imagine that pain. It is not the tantrum of a distant judge, but the lament of a father who sees his masterpiece covered in mold and blood. Time here feels slow, stagnant, and a perversion that no longer allowed the growth of the sacred. The time of judgment arrived. It was not just water, it was a decreation. The Sovereign allowed the chaos He had ordered in the beginning to cover everything once again. The Creator's tears mingled with the cataracts of the heavens. The atmosphere is one of absolute melancholy, the silence of a world that has stopped breathing beneath the waves. But inside the ark, the time was one of waiting. The smell of animals, damp wood, and human sweat. It is the sanctuary of preservation. The ark is the womb of a new humanity, the time of renewal. Noah's sacrifice rises like a pleasing aroma, not because God needed blood, but because man finally recognized his dependence. Here, the sovereign delivers the covenant. The rainbow is not a decoration, it is a war bow hung in the clouds, pointing upward, not toward us. God is saying, if this covenant is broken, the judgment will fall upon me. It is the shadow of the cross projected in the post-flood clouds. The design is restored with a promise of patience. The thread of grace was not cut at Babel. It was tangled so that God himself could come to untangle it. From the first lament of the Nephilim to the explosion of tongues in Shinar, the sovereign has been watching. We are not just survivors of a flood or castaways of a fallen tower. We are the object of a relentless search. In the confusion of your own words, in the weight of your own shadows, remember that the designer remains before the tapestry. He is not finished weaving. Breathe. The scent of wet earth after the storm remains an invitation to return home. The tower fell, but the throne remains firm. There was a time when the echo of the Creator's voice was the only music man needed, but the silence grew heavy. In the days preceding the Great Rupture, humanity began to whisper a different melody. You said we are yours, the shadows murmured, but we say we are our own. Depravity was not a sudden event. It was a slow unraveling of the divine tapestry. The sons of God looked at the daughters of men and did not see in them the reflection of glory, but an object for their own design. Beauty, which was meant to be a bridge to the sanctuary, became a currency for the ego. The world darkened. It was not a lack of physical light, but an anemia of the soul. The Nephilim, those giants of renown, were the living monument to the hybridization of our pride with the void. Feel the weight of that air. It was an air that reeked of resentment and the blood that the earth could no longer absorb. The original design, that delicate dance of purpose and intention, was being suffocated by a thicket of thoughts that were continually only evil. The human heart, created to be the throne of God's presence, had become a workshop of invisible idols. You said, and it was done. But now man was speaking, and what was being made was chaos. The Creator's pain was not that of a distant judge, but that of a father who sees his son disintegrate into madness. It grieved him in his heart. That phrase is the epicenter of the spiritual conflict, the vulnerability of a God who loves what has the power to reject him. The rain was not just water. It was the Creator's weapon made matter. It was decreation. The sovereign decided to withdraw his hand that held the limits of the abyss. If man wanted a world without God, God showed him what the world looks like when the laws of grace are suspended, a return to the void, to tohu vabohu, to formless chaos. Imagine the smell inside the ark, damp wood, the fur of beasts, the sweat of fear, and the incense of desperate prayer. Outside, the world they knew, their brick cities and their monuments to fame, dissolved like salt in the ocean. Every wave that struck the side of the ark was a reminder that life is a fragile gift, sustained only by a promise. You said you would destroy us. Noah might have thought in the darkness of the lower deck, listening to the creaking of the beams. But in the center of judgment, there was a sanctuary. The ark was not a boat of salvation through the merits of those within, but a refuge of sovereignty. The Lord himself closed the door. It was not Noah who threw the bolt. It was the hand of the designer ensuring that the thread of the tapestry would not be cut forever. Este é dos trechos mais fascinantes da sua série, Roberto. A distinção entre a pedra, obra de Deus, única, e o tijolo, obra do homem, uniforme e totalitária, é uma sacada exegética fenomenal para explicar o pecado de Babel. Aqui está a tradução para o inglês. When the ground finally dried, Noah's first breath was the scent of wet earth, but with a purity the world would never know again. It was the scent of a second chance. The sacrifice he offered was not to appease a capricious deity, but an act of recognition. You said we are dust, and here we are, sustained by your grace. Then it happened. The rainbow is God's weapon hung in the clouds. The bow points upward, toward the heart of God, not toward man. It is as if the sovereign said, "If this covenant is broken, let the arrow of judgment fall upon me." It is beauty enveloping human fragility. You said you would never again curse the ground because of man. That promise was not based on man having changed, for the heart remained the same, but on God being faithful to his own character. The spiritual conflict calms for a moment. The tapestry breathes. The seasons return, sowing and reaping, cold and heat. The rhythm of grace is restored in the pulse of nature. Humanity is not a shapeless mass. It is a garden of ethnicities, each with a distinct reflection of the image of God. The Table of Nations is not a boring list of names, it is a lyric of expansion. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, three branches seeking soil to fulfill the mandate to fill the earth. In this growth, we see the curator's design. Every culture, every language that began to gestate in the silence of families had the potential to sing a different attribute of glory. They were roots seeking water, seeking identity. But even in this expansion, the spiritual conflict persisted like an underground current. Man sought his home, but often forgot the architect of it. Every name in that genealogy is a thread. Some threads are woven toward the light, others seem to get lost in the shadow of distance, but the sovereign knows every fiber. There is no nation that is an accident. There is no people outside the map of divine providence. You said for us to disperse, but we said, let us make a name for ourselves. Here, the spiritual conflict becomes architectural. The sin of Babel was not the desire to build, but the desire for absolute autonomy. They wanted security without God, unity without truth. Observe the difference. God makes unique stones. Man manufactures uniform bricks. The brick is the symbol of spiritual totalitarianism. It forces every soul to be identical to the next, to serve a system that attempts to scale heaven by force. Babel was the first attempt to create an artificial paradise, a utopia based on human effort. Let us reach heaven, they said. But heaven is not a destination reached with scaffolding, but a kingdom that descends by grace. The poetic tragedy of Babel is the tearing of language. The word, which was the bridge between you and I, became a wall. The silence that followed the confusion of Babel was the most painful in history. Each family moved away in a different direction, carrying the weight of not being understood. Human unity, when divorced from the will of God, always ends in fragmentation. You said, and the world fell. But he said, and the world began its long journey back. In the spiritual conflict of your own life, you may feel like you are living in the ruins of your own Babel. Perhaps you feel that the flood of your mistakes has erased the landscape of your purpose. But remember this: the designer has not abandoned the tapestry. Babel was not the last word. The sovereign allowed the confusion of languages so that one day, at another moment in time, he could bring a unity that was not based on the pride of the brick, but on the sacrifice of the cornerstone. You are not a castaway from a fallen tower. You are the object of a relentless search. In the weight of your shadows, there is a creator who still whispers promises. Listen, he has not finished weaving your story. Breathe in the scent of the earth after the rain. The tower fell, but his throne remains firm. And his voice, the same one that separated the waters of the heavens, calls you by name, in the language your heart has always understood. There was a time when the air itself felt heavy. It was not just the humidity of a young world, but the density of human thought that had turned centimeter by centimeter toward the darkness. The narrative of humanity, which began with a whisper of life in a garden, had transformed into a deaf roar of rebellion. The days of Noah were not just days of evident sin, but of a sophistication of evil that made the heart of the sovereign shudder. Imagine the divine tapestry being torn by hands he himself had formed. Corruption was not just an act, it was an atmosphere. The sons of God and the daughters of men crossed borders that holiness had drawn, and the result was a distortion of the divine image. The Nephilim walked the earth like living monuments to pride, reminders that man wanted the glory of heaven without the presence of the Holy One. In this sanctuary of shadows, the designer looked at his work. He did not look with the hatred of a distant judge, but with the pain of an artist who sees his masterpiece being consumed by mold. The Bible says that it grieved him in his heart. It is a sacred vulnerability. The Creator is not a machine of decrees. He is a father who experiences the weight of rejection. Every thought of man was only evil, continually. It was a white noise of wickedness that drowned out the music of the spheres. The construction of the ark was the longest and most silent sermon in history. Every hammer blow was an echo of God's patience, a reminder that grace always precedes judgment. Noah, the man of stillness, walked in a righteousness that was not his own, but a gift from the sovereign's gaze. The rain was not simply a meteorological phenomenon. It was the dismantling of the cosmos. God was withdrawing his ordering hand, allowing the waters he had separated in Genesis to unite once again to bury human violence. It was a decreation. The world returned to being formless and empty. Inside the ark, the aroma was a mixture of hay, animals, and the acrid scent of fear transformed into faith. Noah listened to the rhythmic beating of the drops, the Creator's tears striking against the wood. God's judgment is real because his love is real. A God who is not indignant in the face of cruelty is not a God who loves. The flood was the bloodbath of a creation that needed to be washed so as not to die eternally in its own rot. Stepping out of the ark was like being born again. The air smelled of wet earth, of life making its way through the debris. The first thing Noah did was not build a house, but an altar. The sacrifice rose as a pleasing aroma, not because God needed blood, but because humanity recognized that only through sacrifice is there survival. God hung his bow in the clouds. In the original Hebrew, it is a war bow. The sovereign was saying, I have hung up my weapon. My justice has been satisfied for now, and I've placed the bow pointing toward heaven, not toward you. It was the first universal peace treaty. The rainbow is the reminder that although we deserve the flood, we receive the sun. It is the divine intention to preserve life while the redemptive plan advances in silence. The Table of Nations in Genesis 10 is often read as a dry list, but it is actually a poem about the expansion of grace. Humanity began to branch out like thirsty roots seeking the soil of their destiny. Shem, with his inclination toward the sacred, Ham, with his vigor for the land, Japheth, with his curiosity for the far reaches. Every name is a thread in the tapestry. God did not want a monolithic and boring humanity. He designed the diversity of cultures as a reflection of his own infinity. The unity God seeks is not uniformity, but a harmony of distinct voices singing the same song of dependence. But man, in his insecurity and pride, always prefers the brick over the spirit. Babel was the zenith of the human ego. Let us make a name for ourselves, they said. They no longer wanted to be bearers of the image of God. They wanted to be their own image. The brick replaced the stone. Stone is created by God. The brick is manufactured by man. Babel was the attempt to build an artificial paradise, a system where technique and human power could dispense with the sovereign. The architecture of rebellion is always imposing but hollow. God did not descend to Babel because he was afraid of the tower. He descended because the tower was a prison for the human soul. The confusion of languages was, paradoxically, an act of preventive mercy. If man, united in evil, has no limits, he would destroy himself completely. The tragedy of Babel is the tearing of language. The word, which was meant to be the bridge between two souls, turned into a wall. Each family moved away, carrying its own dialect of solitude. The fragmentation of the world was born from the desire for a false unity. Since that day, humanity has been trying to understand itself again, seeking a universal translator for the pain of the heart. You said, and the world fragmented. But the sovereign said, and history began its slow return home. In the spiritual conflict of your own life, perhaps you feel that you dwell in the ruins of your own Babel. Perhaps you feel that the flood of your mistakes has erased the landscape of your purpose, leaving you in a mud of confusion. But remember this, the designer has not abandoned the tapestry. He is the expert in picking up the fragments of broken languages and scattered lives. Babel was not the end. The sovereign allowed the confusion so that one day, at the perfect moment in time, he could bring a unity that is not based on the pride of the brick, but on the surrender of the cornerstone. He does not want you to build a tower toward him. He has come down to be the bridge toward you. You are not a castaway from a fallen tower. You are the object of a relentless search. In the weight of your shadows, there is a creator who still whispers promises in the language of your soul. Breathe in the scent of hope. The tower fell, but his throne remains firm, and his voice, the same one that separated the waters of the heavens and calmed the storm, calls you by name, inviting you to stop building and start resting in his design. The story continues, and your name is written in the thread of grace that unites all nations. You said that the weight of your shadows is too great to be redeemed. You said that just like those builders on the plains of Shinar, you have spent years stacking bricks of effort, trying to reach a height that would calm your insecurity, only to wake up one day and discover that you no longer speak the same language as those you love. You feel that the flood of your own decisions has erased the paths you once knew. But listen to the whisper that travels over the waters of chaos. In the divine tapestry, judgment is never the last word. Restoration is. When the sovereign contemplated the corruption of the earth, his heart was not filled with cold wrath, but with a sacred pain. The flood was not a fit of rage, but a painful cleansing, an undoing of the cosmos so it could be rewoven with threads of hope. If today you feel the waters covering you, it is not to drown you, but to dissolve what is no longer useful, so that you may float in the ark of His grace. Look at the rainbow. Do not see it only as a meteorological phenomenon. Look at it as the neon signature of a God who commits Himself to your fragility. The war bow has been hung in the clouds, but it points upward, away from you. He has taken the arrow of justice upon Himself, so that you only receive the scent of wet earth and the promise of a new beginning. Do you feel fragmented after the fall of your own Babel? Do you feel that your words are walls? The tragedy of confused tongues was, in reality, an act of protective mercy. The sovereign halted the construction of the tower so that man would not suffocate in his own pride. Sometimes He allows our plans to crumble and our voices to get lost in confusion so that we stop trusting in the solidity of the burnt brick and start trusting in the solidity of His character. In your desolation, He is translating your sighs. You do not need to build a tower to reach heaven, because heaven has come down to walk among your debris. The unity we lost at Babel is not recovered with a perfect human language, but with the language of the Spirit, which speaks of sacrifice, of surrender, and of a love that unites what sin separated. Stop carrying the weight of the shadows. The Creator's lament has become a song of welcome. The nations were scattered, yes, but under the same sovereign gaze that knows every root, every river, and every tear. Este texto final é uma síntese emocionante que amarra toda a sua série de vídeos. Ele transforma a genealogia, Mesa das Nações, de uma lista seca em um mapa lírico do cuidado de Deus. É o encerramento perfeito para consolar o espectador e reafirmar a soberania divina. Breathe. The original design has not been cancelled. Your story is not a chronicle of ruins, but the prologue of a city whose architect and builder is God. A city where there will be no walls, because the light of the Lamb will be the only language we need to understand. Perhaps you have said it in a low voice, in the darkest corner of your room. Is this the end of my design? Is this the weight of what I have broken? You said that God's silence was indifference, but in Genesis we learn that His silence is sometimes the lament of a heart that breaks due to the distortion of His own image. Before the water, there was a flood of shadows. The world had become dense, laden with a violence that not only wounded the body, but tore the very fabric of creation. Those days of the Nephilim were not just legends of giants. They were the era of absolute self-worship, where man sought to be his own God, darkening the horizon with the arrogance of his own strength. You said that God's judgment was an act of blind wrath. But look closer. Look through the rain. That was not just a meteorological storm. It was the cosmos dissolving into tears. Imagine the Creator seeing how His love poem was turning into a war cry. The flood was the dissolution of a world that could no longer sustain its own weight of evil. The water did not fall to destroy life, but to wash the canvas that sin had stained with blood. Every drop was a tear of divine sovereignty, a painful retreat to original chaos, so that, from the abyss, something new could emerge. And in the ark, amidst the creaking of wood and the scent of animal and fear, Noah heard what you too have needed to hear in your nights of shipwreck. I remember you. You said that the scent of wet earth after the tragedy was nothing more than temporary relief. But for God, it was the perfume of a new covenant. When the ark came to rest and the mud began to dry, the first sacrifice was not a transaction, but a conversation. The smell of burning wood and damp earth rose like a sigh of human relief that met divine faithfulness. That rainbow you see is not just an optical phenomenon. It is the neon signature of a God who hangs his weapon of war. The bow points upward toward himself, as if saying, "If this covenant is broken, the arrow of justice will fall on me, not on you." It is the promise that beauty always has the last word over judgment. You said that you feel lost in the crowd, like a leaf in the wind in the history of the world. But look at the table of nations. That genealogy we sometimes read in a hurry is in reality a lyrical map of his care. Every name, every lineage that spread out like roots seeking soil was under his gaze. The nations were not scattered by accident. They were sent to fill the earth with a diversity that, however, human pride always seeks a center that is not God. And we arrive at Babel. You said that language is a barrier, that no one understands you, that your words are walls. In Babel, man wanted to build a tower whose peak would touch the sky. They were not seeking God, they were seeking to make a name for themselves. The burnt brick and bitumen were the materials of their own prison of ego. The confusion of languages was not a cruel punishment, but a surgical intervention. God separated them to save them from the suffocation of tyrannical uniformity. Do you feel fragmented after the fall of your own Babel? Do you feel that your plans have crumbled and that you speak a language no one understands? In your desolation, the Sovereign is translating your sighs. He allows our towers to fall so that we stop trusting in the solidity of what we build with our hands and start trusting in the solidity of his character. The unity we lost in that field of Shinar is not recovered by a human effort to be equal, but at the cross, where all languages find their grammar in the love of the Son. You do not need to build a staircase to heaven, because heaven has come down to walk among your debris. Your story is not a chronicle of ruins, but the prologue of a city whose architect and builder is God. A city where there will be no walls, because his presence will be the only language we need to understand. You said that the weight of the shadows was too much for you. But today, the Creator's lament has become a song of welcome. Put the tools of your pride aside. The original design has not been canceled. It is being redeemed in every one of your cracks. Trust in the stroke of his hand over your life. What you call the end, he calls fertile ground. What you call chaos, he calls the canvas for my glory. You said the weight of the shadows was a load that your shoulders could not bear. You said, among whispers laden with existential fatigue, that the world had become too dark, too dense, too full of giants that devoured the peace of the humble. In the echo of the chapters of Genesis, we hear that same lament. It is not just ancient history, it is the cartography of your own soul when it feels that the depravity of the everyday has suffocated the original design. We look back at those days when the earth was filled with violence, where the thought of the human heart was only evil continually. That was the era of the Nephilim, not only as legendary figures, but as the personification of unbridled pride, of brute force trying to eclipse the glory of the sovereign. But in the midst of that darkness, the Creator did not keep an indifferent silence. The flood was not a fit of capricious wrath. It was the dissolution of a wounded cosmos. The rain that fell for 40 days and 40 nights was not just atmospheric water. It was the Creator's tears made into an ocean, a sacred lament that sought to cleanse the infected wound of creation. It was an act of severe mercy. The water undid what sin had corrupted, returning the world to a state of gestation, an aquatic womb where hope, enclosed in a chest of gopher wood, awaited the moment to breathe again. Do you feel fragmented after the fall of your own Babel? Do you feel that your plans have crumbled, that those buildings of identity you constructed with such effort have become debris at your feet? Sometimes we speak a language that no one understands, a language of solitude, of broken dreams, and of what could have been. We build our towers seeking a name, seeking a security that heaven seems to deny us, forgetting that true height is not reached by climbing, but by surrendering. In your desolation, the sovereign is translating your sighs. He allows our towers to fall, not to leave us homeless, but so that we stop trusting in the solidity of what we build with our hands and start trusting in the solidity of His character. The collapse of Babel was a surgical intervention of divine love. God separated us to save us from the suffocation of tyrannical uniformity, so that in our dispersion we would seek the unity that is only found in Him. The confusion of tongues was the prologue to a deeper harmony. The unity we lost in that field of Shinar is not recovered through a human effort to be equal, nor with peace treaties signed with trembling hands. It is recovered at the cross. There, all languages find their grammar in the love of the Son. There, the Creator's lament merges with the cry of victory. The shed blood is the only language that all nations, from the roots of the table of nations to the far reaches of the modern world, can understand as home. You do not need to build a staircase to heaven, because heaven itself has come down to walk among your debris. Your story is not a chronicle of ruins, even if today you feel surrounded by them. It is the prologue to a city whose architect and builder is God. A city where there will be no walls of separation, because His presence will be the only language we will need to understand. In His kingdom, diversity is not division, but a tapestry of colors designed to reflect the infinite facet of His glory. You said that the rainbow was only a physical phenomenon, a refraction of light. But today, look at it again. It is the seal of an unbreakable promise, a reminder that the waters of judgment will not have the last word. The scent of wet earth after the flood is the perfume of grace. Every time you feel that your language is breaking, that your name is vanishing, and that your towers are falling, remember that there is someone who knows each of your cracks and has decided to inhabit them. Put the tools of your pride aside. The original design has not been canceled. It is being redeemed in every one of your failures, in every one of your dispersions. What you call the end, He calls fertile ground. What you call chaos, He calls the canvas for my glory. Trust in the stroke of His hand over your life. He is the translator of your tears and the rebuilder of your ruins. You are not alone in the dispersion. You are being guided toward the final encounter. You said that the world was yours to mold in your image, that your will was the only brush needed to paint the horizon. But observe how the colors have darkened. In the days of the great corruption, before the sky broke, the earth was not only filled with violence, it was saturated with a dense sadness, a cosmic melancholy born from having forgotten the original design. The era of the Nephilim was not an epoch of heroes, but of emptiness. It was the moment when the Creator's whisper was drowned out by the cry of the ego. Depravity did not begin with external acts, but with the erosion of the heart. With that thought that becomes a fortress against the light, every intention was a brick of shadow. And there, in the midst of that darkness that seemed eternal, God's heart was not filled with blind wrath, but with unfathomable pain. It was not a judge striking a gavel. It was a father whose breath became a sigh of mourning. You said that the flood was a cruel punishment, a water blot on history. But today I invite you to see it through the eyes of redemption. That rain was not only water, it was the sovereign's weeping falling upon his wounded creation. The cosmos was dissolving because sin had made it unsustainable. It was an act of terrible mercy, undoing the world so that it could be remade. The architecture of the ark was not a wooden prison, but a womb of grace floating above the chaos. While the waters rose, the ancient world, with all its pride and its invisible towers of self-sufficiency, sank into silence. The sound of the flood was the symphony of deconstruction. Imagine the smell of the air saturated with humidity, the cold chilling the bones, and yet the warmth of a promise beating inside that wooden box sealed with pitch. Pitch, that symbol of atonement, which keeps the judgment outside and the life within. When the waters finally receded, the earth did not wake up with a shout of triumph, but with a sigh of relief. Can you smell it? It is the aroma of wet earth, that perfume only born after the most destructive storm. It is the scent of a new beginning that was not earned, but given as a gift. You said the rainbow is only physics, a precise angle of light through a drop. But in the sanctuary of His presence, the rainbow is the seal of a divine surrender. God hung His bow in the clouds. It is not a bow drawn to fire arrows of judgment, but a bow that points toward His own heart, as if saying, if this covenant is broken, the blow will fall on me. That light is not static. It is vibrant. It is a promise that still breathes. It is the reminder that although man continues to carry the seeds of the fall within him, the Creator has decided that His grace will be vaster than our failure. Every time the sky is dyed with those 7 colors, time stands still to whisper to you that you will not be destroyed for what you have done, because there is a design that transcends your ruins. Humanity began to branch out, not like a plague, but like a garden seeking the sun. The Table of Nations is the lyric of our diversity, a genealogy written with the desire to find a home. Every lineage, every culture that was born was a different facet of the divine tapestry. However, in our wandering, we went back to saying the same thing as before the rain. You said you could find your identity in your blood, in your land, in your name. But roots, if they do not find the soil of eternity, end up drying out. We scattered across the earth, carrying with us the nostalgia of an Eden we could no longer remember, but our souls refused to forget. Diversity, which was meant to be a chorus of praise, began to turn into a battlefield of misunderstandings. We reached the plains of Shinar, with hearts ignited by a cold ambition. Let us make a name for ourselves, you said. Let us build a staircase that forces heaven to recognize us. Babel was the zenith of the human ego, the attempt to create unity without the Spirit, a peace without the Prince of Peace. You used bricks instead of stones. The brick is a human work, uniform, artificial, while the stone is God's creation, unique and solid. You wanted a single language to declare your own glory. But love cannot survive in a language that only knows how to pronounce I. Therefore, the confusion of tongues was not a cruel punishment, but an act of protective restraint. God fractured your language so that you could not unite in your own destruction. The tragedy of Babel was the silence that remained afterward, the impossibility of understanding one another, the loneliness of speaking and having your words bounce off a wall of incomprehension. That is the wound we still carry, the feeling that no matter how much we speak, no one is truly listening to us. But here, in this sacred space where your story meets his, I want you to listen to what the sun is saying today. You said the rainbow was only a physical phenomenon, a refraction of light. But today, look at it again. It is the seal of an unbreakable promise, a reminder that the waters of judgment will not have the last word over your life. The scent of wet earth after the flood is the perfume of the grace that now surrounds you. Every time you feel that your language is breaking, that your name is vanishing in the midst of the crowd, and that your personal towers are falling, remember that there is someone who knows each of your cracks and has decided to inhabit them. He is not the God who looks down from the top of the Tower of Babel to mock our confusion. He is the God who came down, who became the Word, so that the language of love would be the only one we needed to translate. You do not need to build a staircase to heaven, because heaven itself has come down to walk among your debris. Your story is not a chronicle of ruins, even if today you feel surrounded by them. It is the prologue to a city whose architect and builder is God. A city where there will be no walls of separation because His presence will be the only language. In His kingdom, diversity is not division, but a tapestry of colors designed to reflect the infinite facet of His glory. Put the tools of your pride aside. The original design has not been canceled. It is being redeemed in every one of your failures, in every one of your dispersions. What you call the end, He calls fertile ground. What you call chaos, He calls the canvas for my glory. Trust in the stroke of His hand over your life. He is the translator of your tears and the rebuilder of your ruins. You are not alone in the dispersion. You are being guided toward the final encounter, where all nations, languages, and peoples will finally find their grammar in the love of the one who gave everything for you. The story does not begin with water, but with the weight of divine silence. Before the clouds were torn, the world was already submerged, not in oceans, but in a liquid darkness that sprouted from the human heart. We walk through the corridors of Genesis 6, and what we feel is a cold that does not come from the wind, but from the absence of light in the eyes of men. Those were the days of the Nephilim, figures who cast shadows far too long over a land that no longer remembered Eden. It was not just wickedness, it was a distortion of the design. The divine tapestry was being unraveled by hands that preferred chaos to communion. Imagine the Creator's sadness, not as a distant judge, but as an artist seeing his masterpiece being devoured by the mold of pride. The text tells us that it grieved him in his heart, It is the lament of love, seeing the object of its affection choose self-destruction. Then the sky broke. But do not think of the rain as a meteorological punishment. Think of it as the dissolution of the cosmos. The God who separated the waters above from the waters below in creation now allowed them to embrace once more. The world was returning to a state of disorder and emptiness. It was a baptism of pain. Imagine the ark, a refuge of creaking wood floating in the nothingness. Inside, the scent of damp fur, the sound of whispered prayers, and the heartbeat of the only remnant of hope. Outside, the roar of an abyss, claiming what sin had corrupted. The rain was not just water, it was the Creator's weeping poured over a creation that had become a stranger to itself. Every wave was a reminder that holiness cannot coexist with cruelty forever. When Noah stepped onto the new earth, the air was not fresh. It was damp, laden with the perfume of a land that had been purified by the fire of judgment and the water of patience. The sacrifice that rose to the sky was not just smoke, it was the aroma of surrender. And there, over the horizon of a land that still trembled, God painted his signature. Esta é a conclusão definitiva, onde a narrativa teológica se torna desafio prático para o espectador. O contraste entre a uniformidade do tijolo e a diversidade da pedra culmina na esperança de Pentecostes. The rainbow. Do not see it as a simple optical phenomenon. Look at it as a spiritual neon sign in the middle of the fog. It is God's war bow hung in the clouds, but pointing upward, not at us. It is the promise that grace will always be vaster than judgment. Red, orange, blue, every color is a thread of mercy weaving a new future over the ruins of the past. Genesis 10 is the poem of roots. We often read these genealogies as dry lists, but they are the choreography of expansion. Humanity began to branch out, seeking soil, seeking identity. The sons of Shem, Ham, and Japheth carried in their skin and in their blood the seeds of what we all would become. It was a garden that grew without fences, a diaspora of grace, before becoming a dispersion of pride. They were families turning into nations, each with a unique tone of voice, a specific design in the great tapestry of divine sovereignty. But the human heart has a short memory for grace and a long memory for the ego. We arrive at Babel, the zenith of the architecture of rebellion. They no longer wanted stones fashioned by God. They wanted bricks baked by man. The brick is the uniformity of pride. The stone is the diversity of creation. Babel was not just a construction, it was a declaration of independence. Let us make a name for ourselves, they said. They wanted to touch the sky without having to kneel before the owner of the sky. The tragedy of Babel was not only the confusion of tongues, it was the shattering of the human symphony. Language became a wall. Words, which were once bridges of light, turned into labyrinths of incomprehension. It is the poetic tragedy of being physically close, but galaxies apart emotionally. Language splintered as the heart was already fragmented. You have said, in the silence of your nights, that you feel like a collapsed tower. You have said that your efforts to reach fulfillment by your own means have only left you speaking a language that no one understands, not even yourself. You feel the weight of the corruption of your own Genesis 6 and the echo of the dispersion of your own Babel. But listen to the frequency of grace. Today's practical challenge is not to build higher, but to descend deeper. The God who went down to Babel to confound pride is the same God who came down at Pentecost to redeem language through the Spirit. Your story does not stop at dispersion, it finds its way to the great gathering. This is your altar. This is your moment of design and intention. Do not seek bricks of pride, seek the stones of honesty. Take a moment of stillness. Identify in which area of your life you have been trying to make a name for yourself independently of God. Is it your career, your image, your need for control? Write that name on a piece of paper. Recognize that this tower, however high it may be, will never touch the sky. Find an element of nature that represents wet earth after the storm for you. A green leaf, a bit of soil, a smooth stone. Hold it in your hands. Close your eyes and give thanks for the judgment you did not receive, because someone else bore the storm on the cross. Let the scent of grace cleanse your vision. Write a brief prayer or reflection in which you stop trying to explain yourself to the world and begin to listen to God. If you feel that your language is broken, ask the Holy Spirit to be your translator. Write, Lord, my words are not enough, but your word, verbo, is sufficient. Today, look for someone with whom you have an emotional language barrier, someone you do not understand or who does not understand you. Instead of building a wall of arguments, bricks, offer a bridge of silent service, grace. Perform an act of kindness without expecting it to be translated or thanked. Do not fear the dispersion, because the shepherd knows the way back for each of his sheep. Do not fear the silence, because in the silence is where his promise is heard most clearly. Your story is being written by the hand that holds the stars and at the same time wipes away your tears. Trust the design. Trust the weaver. Your Babo has fallen so that his kingdom may rise within you. Esta é a peça final da sua jornada, Roberto. O texto funciona como uma conclusão solene que recapitula os temas do dilúvio e de Babel, transformando o peso da história em um altar de gratidão. A mensagem central é poderosa. Não somos definidos pela altura dos nossos projetos, mas pela profundidade do amor divino. We have walked through the corridors of a history that weighs heavy. We have felt the cold of the rain that does not cease, and the creaking of the bricks that tried to scale heaven out of pride. But here, in the stillness of this sanctuary that we have built together, the shadows begin to yield before a softer, kinder light. The weight of our own rebellion, that frantic attempt to make a name for ourselves, dissolves when we understand that we already have a name written on the palms of the Creator. The story of Genesis, from the flood to the dispersion of languages, is not a record of defeats, but the diary of a patient rescue. Every drop of rain was an echo of His justice, yes, but it was also the water that prepared the earth for a new seed. Every tongue confused at Babel was a necessary wall to stop our own self-destruction, an act of mercy disguised as an interruption. Listen to the silence that follows the storm. It is the silence of grace. You do not need to build more towers. You do not need to shout to be heard in heaven. The language we lost at Babel, the language of perfect communion, has been translated back to us through the blood and the Spirit. Your story, with all its cracks and its failed attempts to reach divinity by your own means, is being gathered by sovereign hands. He does not despise your ruins. He inhabits them to raise them as temples of His presence. This is our altar of gratitude, a space where we drop the bricks of control and embrace the fragility of the clay that we are. This is your moment of design and intention. Do not seek bricks of pride. Seek the stones of honesty. I invite you to participate in this exercise of healing and surrender. Take a moment of stillness. Identify in which area of your life you have been trying to make a name for yourself, independently of the sovereign. Is it your career, your image, your need for control? Write that name on a piece of paper. Recognize that this tower, however high it may be, will never touch heaven on its own. Let the height of His love be what defines you, not the height of your achievements. Search for an element of nature that represents wet earth after the storm for you, a green leaf, a bit of fertile soil, a smooth stone washed by the river. Hold it in your hands. Close your eyes and give thanks for the judgment you did not receive, because the Lord Himself bore the storm on the cross. Feel the texture of forgiveness. Let the scent of grace cleanse your vision. Write a reflection where you stop trying to explain yourself to the world and begin to listen to the Father. If you feel your inner language is broken or that no one understands you, ask the Holy Spirit to be your translator. Write with simplicity. Lord, my words are not enough, but your word, verbo, is sufficient to sustain my soul. Today, look for someone with whom you have an emotional language barrier, someone you do not understand or who has stopped understanding you. Instead of building a wall of arguments or bricks of self-justification, offer a bridge of silent service. Perform an act of kindness that requires no explanation. Let grace be the language that speaks for you. Do not fear the dispersion, because the shepherd knows the way back for each of his sheep. Do not fear the silence, because in the silence is where his promise is heard with the most clarity. Your story is not a chaos of confused tongues. It is a symphony that he is tuning note by note, tear by tear. Trust in the eternal design. Trust in the weaver who never lets go of the thread. Your personal Babel has fallen not to leave you in ruin, but so that his immovable kingdom may rise within you. You are loved in the midst of your broken language. You are seen in the midst of your search. Rest in the certainty that when you are silent, he continues to say, "Behold, I make all things new." The history of our race did not begin with a cry of victory, but with the whisper of a fracture. Before the waters claimed the world had already drowned in its own shadow. We walk through the corridors of Genesis and feel the weight of the Nephilim, not as giants of flesh, but as the gigantism of the human ego, a darkness so dense that it obscured the heart of the sovereign. Have you ever wondered how much God's pain weighs? It is not a capricious anger. It is the lament of an artist who sees his masterpiece crumble under the weight of its own evil. Corruption was not just an act. It was a climate, an atmosphere of violence that made even the air feel heavy, difficult to breathe.